All right. So it's the second episode of this podcast, Nothing Left Out. And today, Fabian Maero with me, I should say Maero with a little better accent,
Yeah.
from Argentina, from Buenos Aires, to be more precise. How are you doing, Fabian?
Hey, hello. How are
Yeah.
you, man? Thanks for the invite.
Yeah. No, it's very nice to see you as always. So, a little bit of context. Fabian and I have been chatting for years now. We've known each other for about 15 years, I think, about through the ACBS community. But we've been chatting more often, more regularly over the past 4 or 5 years. And we usually talk about a lot of things, but mostly behaviorism, philosophy, and all the related topics. Sometimes we go on for 4 or 5 hours discussion. We interrupt the discussion just to barely actually interrupt the discussion because we have
Oh, yeah.
lunch or no, usually it's more dinner. And we continue the discussion with sandwiches and drinks and stuff like that. So the idea of this podcast is to sort of share that. We are, I guess, presumptuous enough to think that I could interest other people to hear our discussions. It might not.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, yeah.
I often thought that discussions I have with people in our community, uh, after I've had the discussions or while I'm having the discussion, I'm thinking, it'd be cool to share that with other people. Like I wish we had recorded it, even for us to listen again, or and I know that I've benefited a lot from having conversation with a lot of people, and I learn a lot this way. So I'm thinking that's something cool to share. And so today we're going to talk about our favorite topic, or one of our favorite topics is functional contextualism. But since you and I have been talking about it for hours and hours, we could, in a way, we could continue just where we left it anytime because that's the way I think we learn and we continue to learn is to revisit concepts that we've already talked about, but we have new insights on it.
Yeah.
But I'm also thinking it would be good for those who are going to listen and maybe less familiar with functional contextualism to get a little bit introduced to what it is, at least to how we see it.
Yeah.
So we'll start with that. Uh, you want to say a few words? I started with a long monologue already. So what do you?
Um, I want to remark the very important part that alcohol has played in our discussions, beer especially.
Yeah. Yeah, are you
No,
saying that it is a necessary condition in order to be good in philosophy?
well, the yeah, actually, I do. I think alcohol and philosophy are two things that go together since the time of the ancient Greeks. You know, the idea of the
Really?
symposium.
Really?
A symposium was a meeting
Yeah.
where you gather with other dudes to talk about philosophy and drink diluted wine. You know,
Interesting.
but
Yeah.
the idea was to drink wine, not too much.
Yeah.
You don't want to get drunk,
Yeah.
but alcohol helps. So yeah. I think it's a good match.
I've read papers that
Yeah.
definitely seem to be written under the influence that seem to be pretty hard to understand. But sometimes I wonder if it's not intrinsic to philosophy. It's rare to find texts that are easy to understand, and I wonder why. Is that necessary for philosophy, or can things be stated simply, or maybe it's a matter of what people are under the influence of when they write or when they think about philosophy?
Yeah. I think a lot of philosophy is philosophy under the influence.
Mhm. Well then, so full disclosure, I'm actually under mate
Oh yeah.
soda. I'm not gonna say the brand. Who knows if that's allowed? No, I think it must be allowed on YouTube. I know. But anyways, no alcohol here. So let's see if it still works. Um, so I was thinking I'd start,
Yeah.
with presenting what functional contextualism is from my perspective. I didn't come up with the concept, the name, the ideas, but when I present it, it's my perspective because it's still my interpretation, and some of the things I'm going to say, I think, are a bit different than the way it's stated in texts written by, I'm thinking in particular of Steve Hayes and his colleagues and students who actually came up with this concept. So it can feel weird sometimes to present something and say, this is what functional contextualism is, and I disagree with the author who came up with the with the concept. But in a way, that's what I think science philosophy is about. I don't think we are too proprietarian with concepts and theories. At least I don't think that was intended that way, especially not in the contextual behavioral science community. We don't really like to say someone is the father or the main developer of a theory or concept. It's more something that we share. I think actually that's something that you told me once. You said something about life being a sort of a conversation in a cafe, an ongoing conversation in a cafe, and people join it. It has already started, and so at first you listen
Yeah.
to other people chatting. You want to say it yourself, maybe, instead of me telling your
It's
metaphor?
a, it's, yeah, it's not mine. I think it was Blackburn, a philosopher who uses that metaphor uh, from another dude. I don't remember the original author, but it is on a footnote on a book. And the idea is that you're walking on a forest and you find an inn, like so you come in and you find like a lot of people arguing about something.
Yeah,
So at first, like imagine like a big loud gathering of people in a bar, maybe a
yeah,
tavern, something
yeah.
like that, like discussing about something. So at first you don't know what the subject is about,
Hmm.
and you're listening stuff, and then slowly, bit by bit, start to pick up a couple of things.
Yeah,
You understand, okay, he's saying this, she's saying that. And then after a while, you chime in
yeah,
and you say, oh, I think,
yeah,
and maybe another one says something against that,
yeah,
and another one says something on your side, and the conversation goes on, and the hours grows late,
hmm,
and you have to leave,
yeah,
and you leave the tavern, and the conversation keeps going on.
yeah,
And I think it's a great
yeah,
image of what academia, of what knowledge, what philosophy, or yeah, I think knowledge is the best word. How it works, it's a conversation. We came here, we try to pick up stuff. When we understand something, we start to chime in, to contribute, to discuss something like that, and then we have to go.
yeah.
And then we have to go, and the conversation is endless. That's the thing. It's endless.
And who knows what people remember of what you say? Who knows? Maybe those who were part of the discussion with you might quote you, but after two. Two rounds, nobody in the discussion has actually been in your presence, and so they might start to quote what you said without referencing
Yeah,
you. And of course, it gets changed, and then someone comes up with a new idea that's completely new, but in fact has been said before. And maybe is even influenced by what you said, but they don't realize it. I really like that a lot. It's
yeah,
there's a sense
and
of letting go of attachment, and at the same time, you're still connected. You're still there's still something important in there, but it's ongoing and it will change. You have to accept that. It's a really beautiful beautiful metaphor. Yeah.
yeah, and I think there is an idea inside of it. that we can pick up for today's topic,
Yeah.
because the core element is that uh, it's a conversation, you know.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
It's a conversation. The thinking, the thought is conversation, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And to participate, you have to be willing to participate.
Yeah.
You have to be willing to fight. You have to embrace the controversy,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
you know. And I think maybe we can revisit that idea in a while,
Yeah.
because I think it's important to functional contextualism, to understand
Yeah.
some aspects of functional contextualism,
Yeah.
or at least to read functional contextualism
Yeah.
in a sense. So I'm glad you brought up that metaphor, that
Yeah,
story.
it's interesting because that's something I often observe is that the what we're talking about ends up having an echo in the process of what we're talking about. And that to me is often the sign that we're doing the right thing, so to speak, because that means it's reflexive. That means
Yeah,
there's a lot of awareness and meta awareness. So yeah, we're talking about functional contextualism, and the way we're doing it is a reflection of functional contextualism. The the idea of having an ongoing discussion is to me represents this concept of holistic integration. This idea that we come together, we try to connect, we try to understand each other, something emerges, but it's momentarily, it's or at least it's ongoing. It could persist. The same idea could continue to be true, of course. When I say
yeah,
momentarily, I don't mean that everything necessarily changes. It's going to be necessarily different, but there's a transformation that leads to new ideas, new at least new ways there's same idea can be thought. And yeah, I think that's in a nutshell, in a way, that is what I think functional contextualism is. Well,
yeah.
okay, well, let me
But now you have to explain what functional
yeah, we
contextualism
still need to do
really
that
is.
because I'm tempted to draw a parallel with the process of therapy with what we just said, and I think maybe we'll come back to that. This idea of an ongoing conversation. I'm thinking that therapy session can also be approached perhaps in this way, but keep that in mind, and maybe we'll come back to it. All right. So the way I like to present functional contextualism is by organizing it around three main assumptions concepts, and they are not assumptions that are dogmatic or that are a priori assumptions. To me, they emerge from a sense of there is something that feels almost inevitable conclusion after reflection. So it sounds like it could be dogmatic because you say, well, there's no other way. But to me, it's more like, well, when I keep thinking, reflecting on this question, I cannot come up with the different conclusion. So that's the assumption at this point. But that doesn't mean we stop there. That doesn't mean that's not something we can discuss. Because I've read here and there, and I wonder what you think about this, that philosophy is closed, like you cannot they they are not open to revision. I don't agree with that. I think it's
Who would say that?
I've
It's
read that idea here and there, and I think to some extent you can find that in some texts on functional contextualism when you talk about philosophy as being separate from science, not separated in absolute way, but that it's the domain that doesn't require justification, cannot be validated or invalidated, because it belongs more to the abstract that it cannot be justified or and so that's what leads in the end to the idea that well you choose your philosophical assumptions and then you have to be consistent with those philosophical assumptions. I don't see it that way. To me it's like values. I don't really like the idea that we choose values and then all we have to do is be consistent with values. To me there are still ongoing processes that you are reflecting on. That's what makes values alive and not judgments, actually. They are you constantly reflect. You wonder, why do I care about that? What do I care about? What does that mean? And yeah, maybe the same response to that question comes up. Maybe it's the same conclusion, but that doesn't mean it's fixed. Quite the opposite. So it's the same thing with philosophical assumptions, in my opinion. You have to continue to reflect, to wonder if it's true, if it's still true, and maybe it continues to be true. And the way I'm presenting functional contextualism is organized around these three assumptions. But there are assumptions that I continue to reflect on, to question, to doubt about. So they are not axiomatic ideas that cannot be discussed. Quite the opposite. So in that sense, it's also very reflexive. You have to apply those assumptions to the assumptions themselves. Does that make sense?
Yeah. But I want to see how you take this to the
Yeah,
definition of, or at least your understanding of functional
yeah,
contextualism.
yeah. So I like to start with this concept of a ontology. And that could make us the whole podcast. Perhaps it will, and that's okay. Because in a way, those three assumptions can
No.
also be considered the same, looked at from different perspectives. So in a way, we could just say, well, it's all about the ontology, or okay. But I like to start with that. And the idea for me is that we say we can only interact with our experience. That really needs to be unpacked because it can be really misunderstood. So the idea is that, well, no matter what you interact with, it's gonna have to be experience. If you say that there is something that exists outside of your experience, right? That's to me, that's the ontological stance, is that you say there is a truth outside of experience. So outside my experience. That's something that exists, but I can't I can't that's where it's very hard to state, because in fact to me it is contradictory. It doesn't hold very long, so it's almost hard to explain it, because it's almost like I'm stopped by thinking, well, yeah, it really doesn't make sense. And yet I think it's very a very common stance on truth. There is a truth out there outside of my experience, and my experience is either completely different, or that's more common, is that it's part of that truth. I'm only seeing a part of that truth. I'm only interacting with a part of it. It's like that sort of tale about the guys who are touching an elephant. Each person is touching an elephant, and they don't know that it's an elephant. That's very often you hear that as a way of showing how it's a matter of perspective, and we only have a part of the truth. I don't really see it that way, because you'd have to know that there is a truth outside of that. And it's if you know that it exists, it's already part of your experience. So it doesn't mean you cannot imagine that there is something outside. You can say there is a universe outside that I've never seen and it exists. That's fine. You can make that kind of statement, but you recognize that it is inside your experience. That hypothesis, imagining that there is another world, is you are interacting with that. And if it does exist, you will know that it exists because you will interact with it in some ways, whether it's through mathematical calculation, or a telescope, or something, or directly by visiting it. But you have to interact with it. Right? But
Wait,
true or not true doesn't really hold to me. Go ahead.
I lost your audio on the last couple of seconds.
Yeah, okay.
Can, can you
Uh,
repeat the last part?
yeah, so basically, what I'm saying is that you cannot rely on a reality outside of experience to validate or invalidate your experience.
Yeah.
Because if you rely on something outside your experience, in the end, you have to interact with it. And so if you interact with it, then that's part of your experience. Now, it's not doesn't mean that I'm saying there is nothing outside of my experience, and that's often understood this way. That's the anti-ontological stance. People will say, "Well, there is nothing outside of experience, so there is no absolute truth." For example, people will say that. In ontology, we don't say there is no absolute truth. We don't say there is an absolute truth. We say it's I cannot play that game. It's to me it's the equivalent of being agnostic. I cannot play that game because it's the statement is already incoherent. If I can interact with the absence of truth outside my experience, well, then by definition, it is my experience. Go ahead, Fabian.
Yeah, I think maybe we are getting ahead of ourselves because we are talking about one reading, one interpretation of functional contextualism, and
Yeah.
maybe the people watching this, maybe they don't know what functional contextualism is. So we are talking about a ontology that is like an advanced derivation
Okay.
of, of functional contextualism. Actually, it's not present on the foundational texts
Yeah, I
of,
noticed that. Yeah.
you know,
Hmm.
it's a later
It's implicit though, I would say.
yeah, it's implicit. Exactly.
Yeah, yeah.
That was the idea. But maybe it's not the best starting point for to follow, like to start with a complex issue. Maybe we can go back what
Where would you
to
start?
what
I
is.
usually start with that with this idea, but where would you start?
Well, I'm thinking about maybe some of our viewers that then doesn't have the slightest idea of what functional contextualism is. So I will start saying that it's a philosophy of science.
Oh yeah, yeah,
Just
you're
yeah,
right. We could start
you
with
know.
that. Yeah, you're right. We could start with that.
Maybe. I mean, because I think it will be easier to understand certain things. It's a
Well,
philosophy
go
of science.
ahead. Go ahead then. What's the philosophy of science, or what do you want to say a few words about that?
Yeah, maybe to give like a little bit of context about the concepts and the theory
Hmm.
before like getting into the details. So functional contextualism is a philosophy of science. The term functional contextualism was coined by Hayes, by
Hmm.
Stephen Hayes, in a couple of papers from the 80s and the 90s.
Yeah.
Uh, there are a couple of articles that outline the core, the basic structure of functional contextualism, and that is an article from 1988
Hmm.
and the other one from 1993.
Yeah.
Varieties of Scientific Contextualism is the second one. And the the idea is that uh, behavior analysis should be contextualist instead of mechanicist.
Yeah.
That was
Hmm.
like the whole point.
Yeah.
So, what is contextualism? Um, Hayes take an idea from this guy, Stephen C. Pepper, and this book.
Hmm. Hmm.
Contextualism arises from this book. Pepper was a philosopher who worked on the first half of the 20th century,
Yeah.
and he wrote this book, World Hypotheses. It's a very heavy book. The subtitle is Prolegomena to Systematic Philosophy and a Complete Survey of Metaphysics.
Yeah.
So
You
fun
have to
reading,
study the title already. Yeah.
a fun reading. So what he proposed was that you can cluster the philosophical systems, the philosophical metaphysics. I mean, when you talk about Plato or Descartes or Hegel or Peirce, James, and stuff like that, the people who created philosophical systems, I mean, philosophical ways of seeing the world,
Yeah.
and I had to say to the viewers, have patience with my English. I'm an Argentinian speaking in English with a French dude. Please have some mercy. Uh, so have some patience. Patience. Um, so the idea was that you can cluster
Yeah.
the philosophical systems in a few groups um, according to the main categories that they use, you know? So the core idea of Pepper was that all the big philosophical systems, the systems that said something about how is the world.
Yeah.
That is what we are talking about, a metaphysics or a general ontology. It's the same thing. The system that says how is the world or how are we going to understand the world can be grouped according to the categories, and the categories arise from what he calls a root metaphor.
Yeah.
So the idea is this. This is Pepper's idea. Hayes is going to do something different with that idea. But Pepper's idea is this. When we are trying to know the world, when we want to know more about the world, what we do is when we encounter a new experience, a new event, a new fact, something new, can be anything, can be an object, a thing, a phenomena, whatever. What we do is we understand that, we approach that phenomena using as a reference another experience that is more familiar to us.
Yeah.
That's the core idea. So
something that is more concrete, that you can grasp better, right? That's the idea with metaphors, right? It goes back to what I was saying earlier about the criticism that's often formulated about philosophy, that it's too abstract, too complicated, but precisely what you're saying here is that we will use root metaphors to understand the world,
the
to
idea
organize the
is,
world. Yeah.
yeah, more than the root metaphors, the idea is that you use a familiar experience as the template,
Yeah.
the model to incorporate something new. So, for instance, a very, very common example of this is, okay, we want to understand the brain. So,
Yeah.
what is the closest thing, or what is the experience, our experience, something from our experience that it looks like a brain or that can help me understand the brain? Maybe a machine, like
Yeah.
a computer.
Yeah.
So I can understand the brain, or maybe I can approach the brain taking as a model the idea of the computer, the categories, sorry, of the computer.
With the whole
So the
idea of
computer
input,
information,
output, processing, and things like that.
exactly,
Mm.
exactly.
Storing.
So my in this case, the computer, the machine, will be my root metaphor.
Yeah.
From the root metaphor, from the main characteristics of the root metaphor, I'm going to abstract my categories. What are the categories? Are how I structure the word.
Yeah.
How I approach the word. What
Mm-hmm.
is the word made of? How it works. My first assumptions. This is the idea is, once I get my categories, I use them to understand, to know a new event. And as I keep presenting to these categories new and new events, my categories are going to refine,
Yeah.
are going to be like more elaborated, more abstracted, more refined, I think, more sophisticated.
And technically,
So
they could also be completely modified, right?
and modify, yeah,
Yeah.
not completely, because you are going to maintain certain coherence with the
Okay.
original metaphor.
Okay.
Actually, what one of the things that Pepper says was that if you go like too far away from your metaphor, from your core categories, your theorizing becomes confused,
Yeah.
because it's like when you are mixing metaphors to explain something, You know, when you start explaining
Yeah, yeah,
something
yeah, yeah,
using a
yeah.
metaphor, and then at certain point you start using another
And
metaphor.
then you don't really know what you're trying to say
It's a
anymore, or
mess.
it's
It's a mess.
confusing. Yeah, yeah.
So that's the idea. And
Or
what?
maybe you would switch to another metaphor, but that means you change your framework, basically. You change philosophy, which is possible. You could come from a dualism to monism because at some point you realize that doesn't work, or the opposite, or
Yeah, that's open to debate. I don't think it's so easy to
hmm hmm
switch models, because the idea was this. So you have your root metaphor. Your root metaphor becomes the set of categories to understand the world, and
hmm
that set of categories, as you develop them, uh, becomes um, a worldview, a world hypothesis.
Yeah.
That is the idea. And Pepper's thesis was that the main philosophical systems, the big philosophical system of the West, at least, um, are just like variations uh, inside a worldview
hmm
structured by a metaphor. It's
Yeah.
like different versions of the same metaphor.
Yeah.
So, for instance, you have the metaphor of the machine.
Yeah.
You know, a machine is made out of
Yeah.
parts, and that is an assumption. So, if you approach the world using as a reference the metaphor of a machine, you're
hmm
going to see the world as made out of smaller parts. You know,
Parts, and you're gonna look at how they work together, and yeah, that's the
exactly.
mechanistic
Yeah,
worldview,
that's
right?
mechanism.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's one of the worldviews Pepper identifies for
Mm.
relatively adequate worldviews. One of them is mechanism, that
hmm
has as a root metaphor the
The
machine.
machine, yeah.
That is basically, and this is important, this is, among other things, Descartes,
Yeah.
the rationalism. You know,
It's
that's
very
the idea.
it's very common in science in general, right? Would you say? I find that the vast
Yeah,
majority of science nowadays is mechanicist. Try to figure out how things work, assuming that they work like machines, pretty much. In fact, when you look at the metaphors that are used to talk about pretty much every topic, it's almost always refers to some kind of machine. The the body as a machine, then machines as
yeah,
machine, obviously, or perhaps I wonder if
yeah.
it's
But
yeah.
you don't have to take to. I think you don't have to take the metaphor idea too literally, because
Okay.
the root metaphor is at the base, you know, is at the base of the
hmm
whole structure,
hmm
is in the categories more than appearing in the theories.
Okay.
You know, it's more like the foundation.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
It's not the same thing. I mean, you can use the machine as a metaphor i- in whatever worldview that you are working on.
Yeah, I understand. Yeah.
The so the idea was that I think that the interesting part of this is that um, Pepper says that you have different root metaphors,
hmm
because you have a lot of everyday experiences that can be used as a reference to understand new events.
Yeah.
You know, the machine, the common sense experience of the machine is one, and he identifies some other root metaphors
hmm
that arises too from the common sense experience. So
Yeah.
another one is the common sense experience of the organism.
Yeah.
The organism then grows, and it develops according to a plan.
Yeah.
You
And
know,
that's the typical worldview of developmentalists, right? They look at stages of development. They tend to follow a particular order. Uh,
yeah, in part.
yeah.
In part, one of the things that I would say is that there is no easy point-to-point correspondence between worldviews and like scientific schools or
Hmm.
tendencies. I think it's a little more complex than that.
You mean
But yeah,
you could have different worldviews inside different theories even, or different at least different fields, at least, like you could look at developmental psychology from a mechanistic perspective, from an organicist perspective, from a contextualist perspective. Is that what you're saying now?
something different. I may getting ahead of myself, but I'm going to get ahead of myself.
We'll come back to
But
it if it's not
no,
right now.
it's this. Um, the worldviews, as outlined by Pepper, are really broad categories,
Hmm.
really broad categories. And um, more often, things don't fit neatly in one of the four categories.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's difficult to put something squarely
yeah.
into one of them because, I mean, you can, for instance, you can say that Piaget, for instance, Jean
Hmm.
Piaget, uh, who was an organicist. That
Hmm.
will be
Hmm.
someone working within a view of the world as an organism
Yeah,
developing. But Piaget doesn't have the teleology,
yeah. The
no,
idea that
that
there is a finality to the
exactly.
development, right? It was not
So you
that
find that
teleology. Yeah. Mm.
teleology. Thanks.
Hmm. Hmm.
You find that in Hegel,
Hmm.
of course, because organicism is the way that Pepper uses to speak about Hegel,
Yeah.
the Hegelian idealism. So it's not exactly,
But
it's not like an
does that
easy.
mean that the categories of worldviews paper listed are a little too categorical? Are they still valid in that way, or are they more like some? Can you think of them more as continuums, perhaps, or almost like you could do a matrix and look at where you are situated among those, because it's often presented as orthogonal, not compatible, and I have a little bit of an issue with that. I read that also in Steve's papers, but he quotes papers, so it's not always easy to understand if that's something he endorses or if just cites. I have a sense that it is endorsed in functional contextualism, uh, that worldviews are not compatible, and that's why you can interact with people who are from a different worldview, but you cannot expect to almost to understand each other because you're not speaking from the same frame of reference. And I agree
Yeah,
to some extent, but not completely. I think that it's viewed too much as completely independent. You're saying often there's a mix, but would you say that in the case of Piaget, for example, when there is a mix of the worldviews, according to Pepper's classification, would you say that it's a reflection of the confusion of Piaget or lack of coherence, or
no.
is it just, or is it the system of categories that of worldviews that is should not be taken too categorically precisely?
What I think is that um, I don't think it's a problem of Piaget more than a problem of the broad categorization
Okay.
that Pepper is trying to do. Because
Okay.
what Pepper is effectively doing is to categorize the
Yeah.
whole of Western philosophy
Yeah.
into four groups.
Yeah.
The whole of Western
Yeah.
philosophical
Yeah.
thinking, and and by extension, the scientific thinking, into four groups.
Yeah.
And that seems like a little bit uh, little, it's
You think it's too
it's
simplistic? Is that what you're saying? Or
yeah, too broad,
we do,
too broad.
yeah.
So you
Well,
know how.
but it's more than that. I think it's that there is a worldview uh, guiding Pepper's system or worldviews. You see what I
Oh
mean?
yeah, Yeah,
So
yeah,
the
yeah.
fact that he's organizing them into categories that are completely exclusive, to me, is a reflection of a certain worldview
Yeah,
that
of course.
that lacks a sense of, to me, of integration and holistic approach. And I think that should be acknowledged more. There is a, you see what I mean?
Well,
Like, yeah,
yeah, yeah, yeah. But let me get back
yeah,
to
yeah,
to
yeah,
my argument. So going back to the idea of the root metaphors, I don't want to lose the viewers
yeah, yeah, yeah.
here.
Keep going.
So the idea is you have four relatively adequate worldviews.
Hmm.
So you have mechanism, the one we talk, organicism, in
Hmm.
which the root metaphor is the organic development, is not the organism, is the organic development of things. It's
Yeah, yeah.
with a final like an end. Then you have formism.
Hmm.
Formism is based on the common sense experience of similarity.
Yeah,
When you have two things that are similar, but at the same time they are different.
yeah,
Like I have, he gives this example. I have two paper sheets,
yeah,
and you have something in common,
yeah.
and then you
So you
have
can put
something
them
different.
together in some ways.
This is white, this is white.
Yeah,
So there is a common quality
yeah,
to both. So you have the substance or the matter, and then the form,
yeah, yeah,
and this leaves you on Plato. This is
yeah,
basically Plato. The idea of the forms that are
yeah.
incarnated in specific instances.
What
Uh,
does that mean as a worldview hypothesis? Because I see that as a almost as a method to understand the world, but that means that you're conceptualizing the world as what? Like it's easy to see when it's a machine. The world is a machine. When it's a organicism, is the world is an organism that is developing. Informism, what is it? What is the world? I understand that it's about looking at similarities and categorizing, but the world is what? Is made of objects to be categorized or something like that?
what you have is more like forms to categorize.
Forms. Okay.
I mean,
The world, the world
actually,
is made of forms, I guess,
forms that you have to
that
identify.
you have to identify. Yeah.
Think about something like we often use this example, the DSM,
Yeah,
the
yeah,
diagnostic
yeah,
manual, because uh, you have a classification of forms,
yeah,
ideal forms
yeah.
that you can see in different incarnations in each patient.
Yes.
You never find a perfect example of someone with a generalized anxiety disorder. You don't find a
Yeah.
perfect example. You will find approximations.
Hmm.
Um, so that's Plato and Aristotle, by the way, and Russell, by the way.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
that's the thing. That's the thing. Pepper is clustering together Plato, Aristotle, and Bertrand Russell.
And you
So
find
I
that
mean,
it's a little too
it's too
too
broad,
different. Yeah, too broad. Yeah.
and then the other metaphor is the metaphor of the things happening, the event. When something is happening, uh, like developing,
Hmm.
like this, like a conversation,
Yeah.
this common sense experience of being doing something,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
and that for Pepper is the root metaphor of contextualism.
There's the
The
act in context, right? That's what you mean by a thing happening.
Yeah, and that's one of the first things that we can point out. Pepper does not use the as metaphor the term act in context.
See, that's why you're not using that term here. I was
Exactly,
curious
because
what you say. Okay, I see.
it's
That's
not.
some that's from functional contextualism then.
Yeah, that's from functional.
Okay.
I mean, what Pepper says, what Pepper says is that is the event,
Okay. Yeah.
the act with he says the act in context, but actually I think I have it here.
Yeah.
No, because I'm
Yeah, yeah, go ahead.
I'm I'm a I'm an obsessive guy. But yeah, I think actually it's nice to look up the
Yeah,
original text.
definitely.
So I can do something actually. Maybe try look
Go
at
ahead, share it.
because I have it. This is this is the book. This is Pepper's book.
Yeah.
Uh, I can, yeah,
You have to
I
read
know
you
I'm
have
there.
to read it for those who are only listening.
Yeah,
Hmm.
yeah. Um, da, 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 da. Chi, 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 chi. Um, the best term out of common sense to suggest the point of origin of contextualism is probably the historic event.
Yeah.
This is what Pepper is saying. You know, the historic event is the root metaphor of contextualism.
Yeah.
By historic event, however, the contextualist does not mean primarily a past event, one that is, so to speak, dead and has to be exhumed. He means the event alive in its present.
Hmm.
The real historic event, the event in its actuality, is when it is going on now, the
Yeah.
dynamic, dramatic, active event.
Yeah.
We may call it an act if we like, and if we take care of our use of the term. But it is not an act conceived as alone or cut off that we mean. It is an act in and with its setting, an act in its context.
Okay, so then you have it then.
Yeah, but I, I think it is interesting to see that we have like a little bit of a shift in meaning.
Okay.
We start with the event,
Uh-huh.
with the historic event that is a totality,
Uh-huh.
and then we end up with the act in context that
Okay.
even when we are pointing out that it is a whole thing,
Hmm.
it is still a thing made out of two things,
Yeah, I
the
see what
act
you mean.
and the context, you
Yes,
know?
yes, I understand.
So you're
There is a dualistic implication in looking at the metaphor. If the conceptualization is an act and a context, then the root metaphor is inherently dualistic. Is that what you're saying?
um, not necessarily, because you can think about the metaphor in many different ways, you know? Not necessarily, but it is a shift that it was never justified, you know?
Hmm.
It was just presented as if was Pepper's idea.
You mean when it
When
was never justified, you mean in the functional contextualism papers and
yeah,
mostly written by
yeah,
Steve Hayes,
because this is the thing.
Yeah.
When Stephen Hayes wrote about this, he changed from the event to the act in context.
Okay, I see.
But that shift was never justified.
Not justified, not completely knowledge. Okay. And for you it is an important shift. Perhaps it was meant as pretty much the same thing from Steve's perspective. What do you think? So the issue you see is that what I was saying, like maybe it's moving toward dualism, or is there another thing that's bothering you there? I mean, not that it's a small thing. It is. I can see the issue. I think I remember. We'll have to see. It might be from the 1993 paper on the varieties of contextualism that Steve, I think, warns against that issue because it does talk about how in the end there is no but no there is no behavior without stimulus, there is no or response, there is no act without context without act. That's something you find here and there in the functional contextual literature. Perhaps it's more explicitly stated in the interbehaviorist literature because that's an important aspect of that approach. uh, and yeah, it's true. If you look at the etymology of all those terms, you always find an idea of relation in the end. Context, behavior, response, it's always about things coming together. So if you say act in context, you may be misleading in that you might start to think of two separate things. Context is already an activity of connecting, an activity of things coming together. So
Yeah,
contextualism is inherently that process of interconnection. Um,
Um, mm, maybe. I mean, it is not a mistake. It is not a fallacy. I think it is an interesting shift to appreciate,
mhm, mhm.
and it is interesting to point out the potential implications
Yeah.
of such a shift, especially being an unexplained shift. So for me, the risk is that um, if you take literally the idea of the act in context, you risk like to end up with a unit of analysis of two terms.
Yeah, I see.
And the idea of the event is that the event has no parts. You
Yes,
don't have two
it's
parts because there are no parts.
it's
That's
more
the idea.
purely monistic in that sense. Yeah.
It's holistic. In this sense, it's holistic,
And I was saying,
or
and monistic, I was saying also, like
oh
the,
yeah,
yeah,
monistic or pluralistic, yeah, maybe. Not dualistic. That's for
definitely not
sure.
dualistic. Yeah.
That's for sure. Because typically, pragmatism has taken one of those stances. So,
Mhm.
but I think it's simply interesting. But the root metaphor is that the event. I think that the best way to characterize the root metaphor is a process.
I like that. Yeah,
It's a process,
yeah,
a process in terms of something that is developing
yeah.
in time, you
But
know.
not like developing in the sense of organicism, though.
No, developing in the terms of like ongoing, no, not
Yeah.
towards any end,
But
because
how is that different though than the developing in the organicism worldview?
in organism you have an end, like a
Okay.
plant,
Yeah.
you have a seed,
Yeah.
the seed of a tree, and in a way, the tree is inside the seed,
Yeah. Yeah.
in its DNA, for example.
Yeah.
So there is a direction of development.
Yeah.
In in contextualism, you don't have an end.
There
You
is not
don't have
an end in the sense of a goal, of a purpose that's
exactly or
definite.
a convergence
Yeah.
or nothing is necessarily. So
hmm
this is a worldview that embraces change and novelty
hmm
because nothing is written,
Yeah.
things can be different.
Could be could change anytime. There is no. Is that different with organicism? There is an assumption of there's more essentialist. Something is stable and true
Yeah,
inside the
in a
system
way.
itself, right? Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Uh,
So so the idea in so you have this for worldviews,
yep.
and to getting into what you said about uh, the incompatibility,
Yeah.
I think it's I would say it like a little bit differently, because the idea of pepper is that the root metaphors, the word view structured by the categories of the root metaphor
hmm
can digest any fact that you throw at them. If I
Yeah.
throw any fact
Yeah.
to the organistic, the organism, or to the mechanism, or formism, or contextualism, they are going to produce a good understanding of the phenomena.
They should be comprehensive enough. They should be able to make sense of anything you.
They can
Yeah.
provide an adequate interpretation
Yeah. hmm
of the fact that I
Yeah.
presented to the
Yeah.
worldviews.
Yeah.
So if I present a brain,
Yeah.
for instance, I want to explain a brain.
Yeah.
Each one of the
Yeah. I see what
four worldviews can provide an adequate explanation or interpretation
you.
of the fact that I'm presenting.
So, for
Uh,
example, the mechanicists are going to look at it as a machine. The organicists are going to look at it as something developing toward an end. The contextualist is going to look at it as a process, something that's happening in the context and is reacting to the context, the dynamic with the context. The
Yeah,
formist is going to look at it as how it's similar to, I don't know, other brains perhaps, or how the brain is similar to other organs or is different from other organs. Okay.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. That would be a way of saying it.
Hmm.
Again, it's not as simple because
No, of
you're
course,
not
yeah.
applying the metaphor directly.
Hmm.
More than that, you are using some implicit categories that
Yeah.
are derived and refined from
Yeah.
your metaphor,
Yeah. Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know? So the what Pepper says is that these four worldviews, world hypotheses, are not incompatible, but more like incommensurable. I mean, you cannot compare them and
Hmm.
judge that one is better than the other because each one of them is capable of producing meaningful interpretations of facts.
Hmm.
So, um, this is the core idea of world hypotheses and the contextualism mechanism, stuff like that. The idea that you have is like you have like sets of categories, and each set of categories are equally good or
Hmm.
equally adequate. And the the truth criteria that we were talking
Hmm.
about, the idea of truth,
Yeah.
is one of the categories, is one of them.
What do you
You
mean?
know, yeah, because I wanted to say this because um, often we think that a worldview is made up uh, like a root metaphor and a truth criterion. You
Yeah.
know, it's
Yeah.
like different elements.
Or you could almost look at it as synonyms, I think, but
Yeah,
capturing the
sometimes
same
it's
thing.
that.
Yeah.
But according to Pepper,
Uh-huh.
at least that wasn't Pepper's idea. The idea of Pepper was that the word, the root metaphor
Uh-huh.
gives you a set of categories.
Yeah.
Among these categories, you find the truth criterion criteria.
Okay.
What
Yeah. Okay.
what Pepper does is to use that category
Yeah.
to explain how in different worldviews a single category can be different. But he's not saying that a worldview is like made up out of a true criteria.
Okay. Yeah. No, I think I understand.
No,
But
it's a
you
derivation.
need to have some kind of truth criteria for each worldview, right? Do you agree with that?
You can derive a word,
Yeah.
a truth criteria out of
Yeah.
for each root
In
metaphor.
a way, a worldview is a truth criteria because it tells you,
No, no, that's the
or
idea.
not the
No,
truth criteria, but it's a conceptualization of the truth to me, a worldview, because it's how you
so what?
it's a sort of conceptualization of the truth,
Oh
the
yeah, yeah,
a
yeah, yeah, yeah.
worldview. So the criteria is how you're going to then measure
But
that,
not
I
only.
guess.
But not only. I mean,
Okay.
a worldview has a lot of categories. You know, for instance, in contextualism, you have quality and texture,
Okay. So when you say
and
categories, do you mean like sort of features, maybe? I feel like that
yeah,
like
like
aspects to it, right? Different elements to the, right. Okay. I mean, trying to say categories, but for me, that's it's that is something that I'm not completely understanding. So you mean a worldview has different aspects to it, and one of them is the truth criteria, right?
let me say it with a metaphor. So to explain,
Mhm.
so imagine a blueprint of a house.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah,
the
yeah,
blueprint gives you what are the main things of your house, but it's
yeah,
just a blueprint. You
yeah,
know,
yeah,
so imagine that you have like different blueprints for different houses,
yeah.
and what you do is you take one of the rooms that appears in every one of the houses, and
Hmm.
you compare those. So
Hmm.
truth will be like the bathroom, you know, and you see how is the bathroom here and here and here, but the bathroom does not define the house. It's one of the parts of the house.
Okay.
The house is not based on the bathroom, you know?
I'm not sure I agree with what you're saying, but I understand what you're saying, I think. I'm finding a bit odd to put the truth criteria as something that would be a part. I'm
Yeah.
like it, because
But
it seems like it could be isolated from the rest of the system, which to me seems so central.
no, it cannot be isolated. It derives from the
Okay, so
organization
perhaps it's
of
the metaphor
categories.
of the blueprint that's a bit because like if you say it's a bathroom, and I know it's just a metaphor, you don't have to take it literally, but I'm trying to understand what you're saying here. If you use that metaphor, is there something like you mean like if you remove the bathroom, what does that change to the house? Well, maybe that's something to it, or I find it's too separated from the other rooms. For me, the truth criteria is something that you're going to find. Yeah, I know it's also helps you understand. Like it seems like it would be more like the walls or the roof or something like that, something that you're gonna find in common to all the other aspects of it. You understand what I
Yeah,
mean?
maybe the roof. Yeah, if
Maybe
you
the roof.
want, maybe
Okay,
the roof.
okay,
But be the roof. But
okay.
anyway, it's not a house.
It's okay. That I understand. Okay, there's a hierarchically it comes under that, right? It's not
You
as global as the worldview itself. That I can go with that, I think.
so to clarify this, if you adopt a worldview in which you see the events of the world in terms of organic development,
Yeah.
so that is going to give you an idea or
Yeah.
a direction to what are you going to understand by truth.
Yes,
So
sure.
you
Okay.
take the concept of truth and you show how is understood in this worldview and this worldview
Yeah.
and this worldview, but
Yeah.
it's not it's not foundational. It's not foundational. It's how the concept of truth works or
Yeah.
can be analyzed inside each one of the categories. Each one of the worldviews. Sorry.
Yeah, I think I understand what you mean. I don't know if I completely agree because
Yeah.
no, because I think when you say it's not foundational, I think it depends on how you conceptualize the truth. Again, if you say is equal to worldview, which I think you can conceptualize that way. What is real? What is reality? It's if you have to describe what reality is, in the end, you're going to describe your worldview, I think. If you have to explain what is true, you're going to have to describe, and I think you could think of it as truth is foundational, or the criteria of truth is foundational, and then your worldview is derived from there. I think you could also look at it that way.
The only place, the only worldview for which that statement will be true, so to speak, or be
Mhm.
correct to say, will be contextualism.
That might be why I'm thinking.
Only contextualism.
And why? Because it's more
Because
dynamic, more
no,
less
no, no,
linear, maybe.
no.
No.
Here is we have to maybe step out of Pepper and
Yeah.
understand this. Pepper is talking with each one of his worldviews. He is talking about different philosophical traditions. You know,
Mm.
when it comes to contextualism, Pepper is talking about pragmatism.
Mm.
Pepper is talking about pragmatism. Contextualism is an umbrella term to try to encompass all the different varieties of contextualism,
Yeah. Yeah.
and it's the same with the other worldviews, world hypotheses.
Mm.
So Peirce and James and Dewey and all,
The main
and
authors of
Van der Holmes
pragmatism.
maybe,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, but not all the authors,
No, no, I understand.
because Pepper is mainly commenting Dewey, and the Dewey's book, Experience and Nature. I think,
Whereas, if I'm correct, Steve Hayes tends to comment more on William James.
yeah, yeah. But the categories of Pepper's analysis are much more similar to Dewey.
Uh-huh.
Actually, Pepper was an admirer of Dewey. He
Uh-huh.
commented,
Uh-huh.
he reviewed Experience and Nature that came out, I think, 1939, something like that.
Mhm.
He reviewed Dewey's Experience and Nature and criticized it because it was too Hegelian for
Mhm.
Pepper's taste, too
Mhm.
organicist for Pepper's uh, Pepper's taste. So the thing is, pragmatism started as um, a way of assessing the meaning of prepositions. Pragmatism, the birth of pragmatism was a way to make our ideas clear. That
Mhm.
was the first idea by Peirce. So,
Yeah.
what do you mean by something? What do you mean by this statement? So,
Yeah.
the meaning of this statement are the operations, the activities that I can perform with the concept.
Yeah.
So, if I say that a diamond is hard,
Yeah.
what it means, what it means is not referring to some sort of quality,
Uh-huh.
like like a supranormal quality, like informism, like an idea.
Uh-huh.
It's more that if I scratch a piece of wood with a diamond, the wood is going to scratch and not the
Yeah.
diamond.
Yeah.
So it's an experience and an operation that I can perform.
Okay.
So in the beginning, pragmatism was that was an idea to interpret what a concept, what a statement means, you
Mhm.
know. And
The idea
so
with pragmatism is that it's grounded in experience
pragmatism is a form of empirism
of
in the
empiricism because
sense,
it is often presented, and that's actually my, I was saying earlier, I like to present functional contextualism with three assumptions. I'll come back to it later, but one of the main assumptions is around this idea of pragmatism. I think it's often um, reduced to this concept of workability toward a goal. What's true is what works. Pragmatism is about making things work, but that's, I think,
yeah.
misunderstood. I think it's not holistic enough, and it's more about being grounded in experience than about getting to an outcome or being focused on workability in that sense. You agree with that?
um, the idea, the core idea in pragmatism is that you will find the truth in experience,
Yep.
and by experience, I mean the action in the world. You assess, you verify the truth of an statement by an
By
action,
interacting with the world.
by a direct verification
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
stuff. So
So that's how it links to that concept of ontology I was saying earlier. You you can't find the truth outside of your experience in the end.
yeah, but the concept of ontology, as Barnard Holmes presented it, was a little bit different than that. I know that that's your interpretation of
Mhm.
ontology. I know that. We talk about that, but we have to acknowledge it's a different way. In Barnard Holmes presented in a different way.
I don't know.
It's not.
Well, is that a good time to talk about it, or you want need to add more to pragmatism first?
No, I think I'd like to follow with the idea of functional contextualism
Okay, go ahead.
because I think it's important. Um, so, um, what I'm looking for something in the book because I want to uh, look at. I have paper again here,
Uh-huh.
and I want to show you this.
Yeah.
Look at this. It was with a theory of truth that contextualism came to birth.
Okay.
You know, the
Yeah.
early contextualists, like Peirce and James, insisted that no word theory was involved in this conception of truth. Pragmatism was, they said, simply a method.
Hmm.
Um, but what
So
Pepper
what?
says,
Does that mean that there is most a rejection of the concept of truth or disinterest in from truth?
no, no, on the contrary, I
Okay.
think they were very interested in the concept of what is truth, what is the meaning of statements, how to establish the meaning of
Okay.
statements, and they started with a method, so to
Okay.
speak, to a method
Okay. A
to
method
give
to find the.
clarify ideas,
Okay. Okay.
and then, and this is Pepper's stance, then this method like thickened into a word theory.
Okay.
Like they
Mhm.
started there and then. So
Mhm.
the only point or the only worldview in which you could say that the truth criteria was there at
Oh,
the
I see.
beginning
I see. I see.
was
Um,
is contextualism.
that's why you were
But
saying earlier that what I was saying about the centrality of truth, or that it is pretty much equal to worldview. You were saying that it's only with contextualism that
it's
you
only
can have that.
contextualism. But but uh, if we are going to follow Pepper, uh, pragmatism may have started by the truth criteria, at the truth
It
criteria.
sounds like that. Yeah.
But anyway, the truth criteria is an expression of its root metaphor. So
Sure.
it's a root metaphor, but you started with here instead of here. So, but the foundational part is the root metaphor, at least on
No.
Pepper's view.
Why
On
would you
Pepper's view,
say? Why would you say that it has to start with the worldview?
no, with a root
No,
metaphor.
with the root metaphor. Are you not? You seem to say that because you say anyways, it is an expression of a world of the root metaphor. Do you mean that it has to precede your truth
What?
criteria?
Come again?
Do you mean that the root metaphor has to precede the truth criteria?
Yeah, yeah. That's the foundation. This is
I'm not
Pepper.
sure I agree with that because okay, so
Okay.
now you have to at least justify it if you say that. Like,
It's justified. Pepper justified. It's a little bit longer than that, but
sure,
that's
okay,
the
but
idea of the root metaphor.
because when you started to talk about root metaphors earlier, you said, well, we apprehend the world through metaphors. We try to understand, view the world through things that we are familiar with or that make sense to us, and then we apply the same model. But isn't there, is it, I could say two things. Why would you select one metaphor over another? Isn't that because there is something that fits better and hence that's guided by some truth criteria? Like, why would earlier when I said, well, the bathroom metaphor, I'm not sure. Yeah, the roof is because I'm guided by a certain way. I'm thinking it should be true or not true. Or else, what is guiding that selection of the metaphor? Or is that another metaphor that guides the choice of a worldview of the root metaphor?
I don't think, in a sense, I don't think most of the time we choose
Okay.
our root metaphor. I mean, take this. You don't choose rationalism. You don't choose the philosophical. I think it's clearer if you like step out of the
Hmm.
of Pepper's terminology. Uh, you don't need to explicitly adopt rationalism in order to speak of mind and body,
Hmm.
dualism, for instance. You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
people who speak of dualism,
Yeah,
they are not
it might be
choosing
because
a
you're in a
metaphor.
culture that's shaping that, and I
Exactly,
agree with
because
that. I agree
yeah,
with that. But at some point, if you are like we're doing right now, exploring those worldviews and criticizing them, trying to understand them, you move toward a choice of what seems to fit better your understanding of the world or how you want to understand the world. Like, why would you choose to be a contextualist over organicist or over a mechanicist?
you don't
It's
choose it. That's the idea. You don't choose it. I mean, you
Well,
can choose it in a way
what
with philosophical reflection, with stuff like
I
that.
mean, I don't
Yeah,
mean
but
don't mean choosing in the vacuum without in the pure total free will. That's not what I mean. But there is still a selection criteria. You're still saying, okay, you know what? Like you ended up being contextualist, I ended up being contextualist over mechanicist, because there is something that selects that. Of course, you could look at it as we are the product of our contingencies of learning,
I
and
would
then
say that.
but still, you have to think, why was that selected over something else? Why are we right now saying sometimes, I agree with you, I know I don't agree with you. You're saying it's just because it corresponds to our worldview. I don't, that seems,
I think there is a choice in the sense that you are following some alternative. You
mhm,
are like
mhm.
taking a path. I don't think that is a deliberate or explicit or voluntary choice.
Okay.
Many times the choice is made by for us by our teachers, by our culture that presents you, okay, the word is this. They talk about like the practice of the customs of the verbal community,
Hmm.
so to speak, you know. But I don't choose
Yeah,
in that
I don't
sense.
agree with you.
I
I don't
can
agree with you.
evaluate that,
Yeah.
but there is no at least in paper there is no mentioning of people like choosing like willy-nilly any metaphor.
Yeah.
It's more that because the metaphors, the root metaphors, the categories structure how you see the world,
Yeah, I
and
understand. But
it's not
that's the,
that is not
that
something that you can step out of it, you know,
yeah,
and
yeah, but you can be
or abandon easily.
No, I'm not saying it's easy, and I'm not saying you can step out of it, but you can be reflexive on it. It's because if
Yeah.
you say that, it would be pretty much like you have no ability of reflecting on your own behavior, of being, and again, I'm not saying choosing in the sense of free will, independent of context. I'm saying I feel like you're looking at it in a way that's too linear, deterministically linear. I have a worldview, it happened to me, and I'm acting according to that worldview, and there is no transformation of that. There is no point at which I can look at my own way of thinking about the world, and that could change. Now, I'm not saying that, again, it's not a free will thing. At some point I decide out of the of context. Now, of course, that whole process is going to be an interaction with the context, but that's what I mean is that there is a sense of what is better than something else. Why would I choose that worldview over another worldview? Saying you're not choosing, I disagree with that. I think I'm not saying I'm choosing it like I would choose a flavor of an ice cream, or, although even that, of course, can be determined. But what I'm saying is that it's not like there's a range of worldviews, and I'm like, all right, let's see which one. It's more like an exploration, a test, and something
Yeah, yeah,
that
yeah.
fits
No,
better
no.
than the next one. But there is a process. That's what I mean by process of choice.
It's, I mean, it's possible to choose. It's possible to reflect, of course. It's possible to change, and in order to do that, you have to be conscious. At least
Yeah,
if we are following Pepper, I mean,
yeah, yeah.
I'm pointing out this way because I have the screen with
Because
Pepper's book,
he's
so
listening to
Pepper
you.
is here.
He's listening to you. He's in the on the couch
he's,
right now. He's like, no, no, no. I disagree with
he's
you.
listening here. It's possible, of course. You can switch. Try to think about this. You can switch from a Cartesian position
Uh-huh, uh-huh,
to a Hegelian one.
uh-huh.
You know, you can switch.
Can you say more
Uh,
about that? Like, what do you mean by that? When you no, I see what you mean. You can switch. That was just an example. You mean like you can switch
It's
from
an
a,
example. You can
okay, yeah,
switch. That will be a switch from mechanicism
yeah,
to organicism. You
yeah,
know,
yeah.
you can do that. But how many times have you seen people switching from rationalism to idealism?
You know, it's interesting you say that because in some
It
ways
happens, it's possible, but it
that
is not
it
simple.
depends on how we look at it. In some ways, I could say, no, you're right. It's very rare and people don't change. But on the other hand, I could say, every moment pretty much because precisely it's much more complex and dynamic and mixed than
Well,
that.
the movement, yes, but the individual people is more difficult. You can do it. I'm not saying that you
No, no,
cannot
no.
do
I
it.
mean, even individual level, I think I am not sure we are as consistent as we think we are. I think
Oh
listen
yeah,
to people and they will say one thing that's from a contextual perspective, and the next sentence they're saying something that's more from an organic perspective. And that's where we detect a form of inconsistency. Um and
yeah,
but they don't necessarily see it that way. They don't recognize it that way. So but I agree that it's not the same thing as changing your worldview completely, like having a stance that's coherent and then shifting to another one. But yeah, I don't still even let's assume that people don't change often. That's very stable. It makes sense. It's like every a core belief system or what's the word I'm looking for? Constitution, for example, for a state. We know that doesn't change too easily, or values they are relatively stable. I buy
yeah.
that, no problem. But still,
That would be
why?
an excellent analogy. That would
Yeah,
be an excellent analogy. It's changeable,
but not
but it's
too easily.
not
That
too
yeah,
often.
just like
Not too
values
often.
are stable versus actions and strategies can be much more flexible. Yeah.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
but
That would be like
I'm not saying I think and it's interesting point because I often found that the idea that we choose values doesn't really make much sense. To me, they are more endorsed.
wait. I lost the audio.
Yes.
Now you're back. Come
Am I?
again the last 10
Okay.
seconds because
I don't know why
I
it
lost
dropped.
you.
Didn't touch
Yeah.
anything. Okay, you can hear me. Okay. So it's interesting you're talking about choice because with regards to worldviews, because in a way, it comes to for me, I never really liked the idea that we choose values if it means like you're looking at a range of values and you say, I want this, I want that. It doesn't really make sense to me. It feels too much out of actually out of context. And it's probably not what is meant when in definitions you read of they are freely chosen. It's probably not in that sense because that would violate too much the contextualist worldview. But still, I have a hard time using that term because it's so connoted with the sense of absolute agency where you're like, I want this and I'm going to be like that and that's going to be my value. For me, it's more like I reflect on what I care about, what's important, and I notice it's that sense, it's very pragmatic, is that I observe my experience, I test things, actions, and I notice what makes me feel good or not good, or right or not right, or okay with myself and others. And seems to be true, it continues to be true. And I'm like, yeah, you know what? It seems like I value, and then fill the blank. So in that sense, it's endorsed. I could say that of worldviews, I think, to some extent, but not. But I think it's missing that process of reflection I was talking about with values. And to me, that's the process of choice in a way. It's that I go toward that value, I go toward that worldview because that's what makes more sense. That's what is making sense of my world. So in that it's in that sense that I'm saying choosing. I'm saying, and that's where I link it to the truth criteria. Is that why would I choose? Now, what would I choose um, the root metaphor of organicism when it doesn't match my experience or there's something that doesn't fit with my sense of truth? You see what I mean? It's like I feel like you could look at it that way. Is that I end up choosing the metaphor that fits my sense of truth, or at least I don't see necessarily a sequence where one has to come before the other. I see it more as different facets of the same process, perhaps.
Yeah, it's I mean, it's valid and it is a discussion worth having. It's not exactly what Pepper is
No,
saying, but
I understand that. And
here and
yeah,
yeah, I think it can be said, but strictly like adhering to Pepper,
okay.
it doesn't work like that. It's like a metaphysical system. When you are working within a rationalist
Mhm.
worldview, you tend to work
But
inside
you
a
see that
rational
that's the thing
worldview. You
that's
can wait, but you can
sorry.
reflect. Yeah, let me finish.
Yeah.
You can reflect on that. You can think. You can philosophize. Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
It's possible because people are doing it all the time. We are
Yeah.
thinking about pragmatism and discussing about pragmatism and categories
Hmm.
inside pragmatism and forms of pragmatism, and we do it all the time.
Hmm.
Yes, but it is as the Constitution. It is something that it does not change easily because
Yeah.
it is informing how you see the world.
No,
What do
I
you
understand that.
consider
I
to
understand
be
that.
real and what do you consider to be unreal?
Yeah.
So it will for you. Try to imagine yourself to adopt a mechanicist view,
Hmm.
not as a contextualist. Try to imagine yourself right now about again as a mechanist, and yeah, you can play with the idea of the machine,
Yeah.
but you are not using
You see,
and you
okay.
won't use the base categories of a mechanicistic
Yeah.
worldview to interpret reality. You know,
Yeah.
it's possible if you want to like psychologize,
Mm.
so to speak, this to convert this, it's possible, and
But
it's
you see,
interesting.
that's
Actually,
I think there's a bias there is that it's the system is organized as discrete. And so like, okay, well, you see how difficult it would be to adopt another category. Yeah, but it's, it's conceptualized as categories to begin with that are discrete. To me, it feels you were saying talking about the DSM earlier as an example of categories from its perspective. Once you've created the world like that, you say, well, you see that in that category or that category, and when you say, okay, maybe you could be, but that's already threatening the organism uh, of the system already. And I'm saying, well, but you said that it was organized like that. If I look at it differently, maybe it's not that difficult to adopt a mechanicist perspective and to still be contextualist. It's Steve talks about that as a way of borrowing methods of mechanicism in the service of contextualism. I would say that's an interesting way of thinking about it. But and he says there's a risk of slipping into mechanicism if you do that, but it's possible. Okay. Um, what I would say is that maybe you can look at what is mechanistic in contextualism. What do they have in common? And I
yeah,
about that too, to be fair. What's common between organicism and contextualism? What's common between mechanicism? So it does talk about it. But that's why I'm saying I'm not sure I would want to see them as categories that are orthogonal, and then the shift from one would be if you think of it more as continuums, as saying it might be perhaps better to think of them as continuums and look at dimensions. It's interesting. We must always end up moving from categories to dimensions, right? Uh,
yeah.
it could be interesting to play with that. Like, for example, there are mechanicists who are much more functionalists than others. Some are a little more formist than others. They look at parts of a machine, but they are not really interested in how that's leading to an effect and an impact. It might be a little more like, here's the name of the different part. Um,
Well, I think, yeah, I mean, yeah, it's possible. If you want
because
to
the way
conceptualize
I'm
that,
thinking of
you
functional
did-
contextualism, my way of thinking of functional contextualism is would have a root metaphors that incorporates all of the root metaphors of paper system, not just the acting context. Or you have to understand the acting context as something that can integrate all the other root metaphors.
yeah, no, you cannot do that. At least not according to Pepper.
According to
You can
Pepper,
do it.
I know, but
You can do it.
I
You
disagree with
you
that.
can try it. You can try it, but it's not what Pepper
I think
says.
that's
Maybe,
what functional contextualism is about. It's not even like I can try it. To me, my understanding of it is it does incorporate all those root metaphors.
yeah, that is not what Pepper says. I mean,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah,
I
I
understand.
just want to like to
Yeah,
put
yeah,
this clear. It's not Pepper stance. Actually, Pepper stance opposes to that.
yeah,
What you can do at most, and this was Hayes' idea, not Pepper's, is to do an strategic borrow of some
yeah,
concept
yeah,
or particular theory, like a piece of it,
yeah, yeah,
but to merge or to co-opt the root metaphors. Pepper says that is impossible because that leads to eclecticism. That leads you to a wait to a new to a new root metaphor.
Why
Because
not?
when you start when it's the same thing with the metaphor when you're explaining. If you start explaining something using a metaphor, and then inside that you try to integrate different ways of explaining different metaphors into the initial metaphors,
Mm.
you ended up with a mess.
Not necessarily. It depends on how
Try
you.
to
No, it depends how you go with the integration process. What's the difference between eclecticism and holistic integration or integration? Like eclecticism, we say eclecticism when we say there are different things, parts, approaches that are put together, but they don't really interact with each other. It's like you put things in a bag, they're in there, but
no,
you,
not necessarily. I mean, not necessarily. Eclecticism for Pepper. I mean, for
yeah.
Pepper. If you are going to move to other conceptions of eclecticism, I mean, yeah. For Pepper, eclecticism is when you try to merge categories. When you try
Yeah.
to see
The whole apple and
something
orange thing.
with different categories. For instance, trying to conceptualize something as a machine and at the same time a similarity.
Why
So
wouldn't that be? Why wouldn't that be possible? Don't we do that all the time? I mean,
no. I mean, according to Pepper,
no. Okay,
when
let's drop paper a little bit, because
oh
if
well,
no, but just like I would like to hear
but
your
but but
perspective on that.
it's this is this is Pepper's idea. I think what is wrong here is the categorization. I think there is a good case against contextualism in a sense.
Okay, what do you mean?
There is a good case against the idea of the root metaphors and the idea of the word hypothesis. That's
Okay,
the
all
point.
right, all right. Okay, okay. No, no, I'm glad you're saying that because I appreciate that you are referring to Pepper. It's very helpful. I didn't read Pepper's book, and I intend to do it at some point. But it's helpful to have your more direct um, reference to it. So I really appreciate that you go back to Pepper and say that's not what said Pepper. But I also want to have space to say maybe we can disagree with what he's saying. We can go beyond that. Um, because I think, I guess my concern is that if we are always referring to Pepper, we end up being trapped in Pepper's system. And Steve said in his papers many times when he refers to Pepper's worldviews, he says, my point is not to necessarily defend Peppers or to argue on his behalf or embrace the whole thing, but he finds interesting this organization in terms of worldviews, if only helpful. And it's in that spirit also that I want to look at Pepper. I don't want to look at it as, well, Pepper said that, so we have to adopt that. I like the idea of worldviews. I think it's an interesting way. Just like DSM categories, I still think that they can be useful in some ways, because even if you don't use that, you will use another system of categorization in any ways. By the way, that's a form of formism, in my opinion, which is totally part of contextualism in some ways. When we build classes of behaviors, to me, we are doing some form of formism. Maybe it's based on function and not form, but it is still something that is of value. We do categorize. If we start to say that it's only formists who are interested in categories, that's not true. So, anyways, I do like the idea of worldviews, but I prefer thinking of them as much more dynamic, dimensional than those ideas that are completely discrete. That to me, that's not really justified. What do you think?
I think that of course you can argue anything. You can argue for anything and develop your argument in any direction that you want. But I think that when you are developing another's ideas, I think it is useful to have a firm grasp of what those ideas are
Mhm.
in order to track the transformations and the resignifications
Yeah.
of your own theory. And Steve Hayes, uh, does that a lot. He changes significant portions
Mm.
of Pepper's idea, and often he does not justify them. For
Okay.
instance, what we just saw earlier about the act in context,
Yeah.
the change from event to act in context, is a minor change, of course.
Mm.
It's a minor change. It's just a terminological change,
But you
but
did,
it's
you did quote a paper, and there was acting context in it. So, in
yeah,
what?
but it's not his first choice.
Okay.
It's not his first choice.
Why
Actually, it
is it
was the
something important
worst.
to you? But
It
why is it
was
important to you? That change? How significant is it?
because it's not that important. It's not that important. But I still don't have a justification to mischaracterize Pepper's idea.
Okay.
It's like Skinner says that behavior is only movement. Well, no, he says something different.
That,
You know, it's
I must be missing something because I understand it was not his first terminology. He said you
yeah,
could say act in context, but he said
yeah.
you can say
But
act in context. So it's how can you say that it's misrepresenting his
let me give you another example.
okay,
Maybe this
yeah,
one will be a little bit more powerful.
okay,
According to Pepper and Hayes, to Hayes, the true criterion in contextualism is successful working.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that was like repeated ad nauseum,
Yeah, yeah,
the
sure.
idea of successful working. Oh,
Mm.
and Steve says the truth criterion of successful working is the truth criterion of uh, contextualism, according to
Yeah.
Pepper.
And
But now,
according to, yeah, I think I remember reading that probably in
so
93 paper, in the 1993 paper, right? We can check
yeah,
that, but yeah.
but look at what Pepper says about the successful working reading of the truth criterion. Pepper says it's an interpretation of the truth criterion, successful working. And
Hmm.
Pepper says it is the worst interpretation
Really?
of the truth criterion. Yeah, I'm going to read it. It's easier
Go
that
ahead, yeah.
way.
I think I
So
remember you mentioned that, but I forgot that it was
uh,
stated like that.
let's check the objections of Pepper himself to the successful working interpretation. First, the successful working, the idea that it's true what it works. Look at what he says here. It is asserted that this does not define truth and error, it merely points out existent facts.
Okay.
So, the first problem with the successful working, according to Pepper, is that success is a fact,
Okay.
it's not truth. Otherwise, you are conflating
So he
success
doesn't
with
like the
truth.
idea that you conflate truth
So,
and
Pepper
workability or
identifies
success.
this as a
And
problem
why is it a problem according to Pepper?
because this only speak of the quality of the action. Some actions are successful and reach their goals, and some are not. So also some actions are swift and some are slow. Some are delightful and some are painful. So this is the first objection. The second one is this: the truth is a property of
Mhm.
statements,
Ah, yeah, I
but
remember you said that
if
before.
you if you read truth as successful working, where does that leave your hypothesis?
Hmm.
You cannot assert the truth of an hypothesis. I'm going to read it.
Yeah.
Uh, Taken literally, this theory asserts that the hypothesis is neither true nor false when it is framed, since as yet it is not either successful or unsuccessful. For how can you know how it works before it is carried into operation? Uh,
That,
but after it
okay.
is carried into operation as success has been attained, the hypothesis cannot be called true because it is past and gone. So a hypothesis can never be successful when it's framed nor can success ever be hypothetical when it comes. And finish with this. Uh, in fact, the successful working theory is only a half-hearted contextualistic theory. So it's not a contextualistic theory, according to Pepper.
Okay.
No, and the thing is, he offers a couple of other interpretations of the true criteria of contextualism, of pragmatism, that are better in his view. I don't mind much of what is like the correct interpretation. I don't care
Mm.
about that. What I care about is that
It's
we are joking.
knowledge.
We are
Yeah. Yeah.
joking with the successful working hypothesis is the true criterion of contextualism according to Pepper. No, he
Mm.
says no, it's the worst one.
He pretty much says
It,
the opposite. Yeah. Mm.
he's saying the opposite.
Mm.
And you see these changes,
Yeah.
these slight
Yeah.
shifts in the conceptualization
Yeah.
that are not justified.
Hey, that's an example of the that conversation in the tavern, I think.
Yeah, 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 yeah. And the thing is, I think these shifts are, of course, are valid. You can do it. I'm not doing it
Yeah.
that you can. I'm not saying
What
that
you
you
would
cannot do
like
it.
is that shift to be more acknowledged and discussed.
Of course, because if I'm like supporting my argument
Yeah.
in another analysis, well, if I'm going to change something, let's say that Steve says to me, successful working is better. Okay,
Mhm. But yeah.
where is the argument? And the argument is not there. I never, the other two interpretations is verified hypothesis from Pepper.
Mhm.
You have successful working is one way of interpret the true criterion. Then you have verified hypothesis, and then you have qualitative confirmation. You
Mhm.
never heard of those two.
Okay.
You never heard those two interpretations
Mm.
discussed,
Mm.
nor you ever heard any discussion of this successful working true criterion against the rest of
I
the
see. Do you
pragmatism
think
of
it's
the
taken
20th,
too much?
21st century.
It's taken too much for granted. And when we read the functional contextual papers, and most people don't even read those papers, they read some references to that in as part of a presentation on ACT. And so you're concerned that it spreads some sort of dogmatic idea, protected by the idea that it comes from something that comes from something, and hence hence it must be true or it must be valid because people have been thinking about it. And
Yeah,
I see your point. It would be interesting to ask Steve directly about that. If he was how much he was aware of it, if it's his interpretation, he might disagree that he acknowledged it. Perhaps he point at somewhere he talked about it. I don't know. Um, in any case, I don't think I agree with Pepper on this criticism. Like, let's take the hypothesis when he says there is no way to tell if an hypothesis is working right or true. Is that what he did he say? Because it will be because, like he said, stating an hypothesis, you have not yet validated if it was a good hypothesis or not. So the statement of the hypothesis cannot be true or not true. I disagree with that. You could say that stating an hypothesis is working in that it leads you to test it. And it does its purpose. Its purpose is to ask a question so that then you can answer the question or at least explore the question. So
yeah,
it's asking a question is successful because it asks a question. It's the same idea that I find when values work, when we say you don't know what your values are, but if you're wondering what your values are, you're already valuing. You're already doing the right thing from a values perspective because you're engaging in the process of valuing by wondering what you care about. So I think I disagree with him in the idea that stating the hypothesis is disconnected from that process of truth because it would have to be tested first. In and of itself,
yeah,
stating an hypothesis is working.
Yeah, what he's saying, if you reduce the successful working to the truth to the act of verification,
Yeah,
it
that's
is
that's a
there,
problem. Yes, that
and that's
case.
the idea of successful
Although,
working. It is truth what
why
it
would that be a
works.
problem? Because you can always say that you need a whole sequence of events to tell if the stating the hypothesis was successful or not. If you if you conducted a whole study and then you lead to something that's been helpful to find, you can say, well, it worked to make that hypothesis. Why would you need to have that validation come as the next step? It can come at the end of the whole process.
Um, yeah, and that's the second interpretation. Yeah,
I don't see what problem there is in there. I wonder if, I mean, again, that's something we should ask Steve, but I wonder
it
if
is.
the reason why he interpreted that way, and I agree that when you quote paper like that, it feels very strange to read then papers on functional contextualism claim that Pepper said it was successful working as a truth criteria when he said pretty much the opposite. That being said, okay, so what is the alternative stance of Pepper to know if it's significant? This
Come
misquoting
again?
is significant. I'd like to know what his position was. What is the truth criterion for Pepper?
Of what? Of contextualism?
No, for according to Pepper, if it's not successful working, what is his approach to the truth criterion?
So yeah, the idea, the general idea of the pragmatism approach to truth
Hmm.
is the the approach needs a direct verification in experience. As you were saying earlier, you need
Yeah.
that.
Okay.
But where is the truth? The truth is in the act, is in the hypothesis, is in both. How do you analyze that? Is going to give you different interpretations
Hmm.
of the um, of the truth criterion.
Hmm.
If you say it's successful working, the act is true. The act is true because okay, so
Mm.
then a hypothesis is not true because the truth belongs to the act of verification.
Okay.
That's the movement. So if you move to okay, now the truth is the verification, the hypothesis, sorry, then you have the second interpretation that is verify the hypothesis, and then you have another more sophisticated version of the contextualist criteria of truth, that is the qualitative confirmation interpretation of the truth hypothesis. The third one is a mess. It's not
Hmm.
relevant. It's not
Okay.
relevant. I think Steve chose successful working because it is easier. Basically, it
Well,
is.
it's easier to put into practice, especially in context of science.
It seems easier to understand. Actually, Stephen says that
Perhaps.
in no, Stephen, no, in the 1988 paper, they say because he wrote it with Linda
The
Hayes and
1988 paper is the paper that's it's the review of Pepper's book.
finding the
Yeah. Yeah,
philosophical
we'll
core.
put the references
Yeah,
in the comments of
finding the
the
philosophical core.
podcast. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's simply a matter of let's let me show you something. This is the 88 paper,
Hmm.
and here do you have sorry, ¿dónde carajo estaba? This. The true criterion of contextualism is successful working. This is the 88 paper, the first
Hmm.
paper in which Stephen is speaking about this.
Yeah.
And I don't have a, if I'm only reading this, I don't have the slightest idea that this is Hayes' idea of Hayes'
Or Pepper.
interpretation,
Yeah.
and not Pepper. If
Okay.
you are going to read this, okay, Pepper says that the true criterion of contextualism is successful working.
Yeah, yeah, I
There
see.
is no provision here that anything is different
Hmm.
or
Hmm.
you have something different. It's successful working. That's why I think is. it's not deceptive, but it is incomplete.
And
It is incomplete.
do you think functional contextualism would benefit from considering the alternative truth criterion that paper discusses instead of successful working? Because that's, I think that's the perhaps the most important in the end for functional contextualism. Are we missing something that could be beneficial? Um,
I think that functional contextualism will benefit from like stepping aside from Pepper's
mhm.
analysis and integrating the ideas into the main philosophical discussion. Because
Okay.
let me let me say something.
Yeah.
This analysis, Pepper's analysis, and by extension, Steve's analysis, because Stephen is only quoting Pepper.
You
And
mean
Pepper,
with regards to not with regards to philosophy in general? There is some reference to um, um, William James, but no, you're right. There's not a lot of references to philosophy. Yeah,
yeah,
you find that
and
more in Linda Hayes or Parrot, depending on when she published. There are more references. In fact, in the same book, the Varieties of Contextualism. Uh, There is a paper I was just reading actually by I think it was at that time Linda Parrott or else it's Linda Hayes. I forgot. But there are references. I was kind of interested. Many more references to different philosophers than you find in Steve's.
yeah,
It's not a criticism necessarily. I don't know if you meant it as a criticism, but to me, I don't necessarily expect psychologists to go in a lot of depth when, even when writing about philosophy, because you take what's useful also. But are you saying
no,
that
but
but you're saying that there's something that is to know in our, or at least we will benefit from taking into consideration other
yeah,
perspectives.
this is an analysis made in 1942.
Mm.
And Stephen
Peppers
is
analysis, yeah.
based his analysis on a single analysis because this was Pepper's idea. This
Yeah.
is not a development, this is not something widely
Mm.
accepted. No one in the philosophical community, at the world philosophical community, talks a lot about Pepper. If you do a quick like
Mm.
Google search, Pepper is unknown. And
Maybe maybe they're wrong.
yeah, it's not necessarily a bad thing,
Yeah.
but
It
if
says
you're
something,
missing,
perhaps. Yeah.
if you're missing, I mean, Stephen writes this in 1988,
Yeah.
so you are missing at least 40 years of pragmatist developments.
Mm, mm, mm,
It's like trying to conceptualize today based on Tolman. They're
mm,
trying to construct a psychology today based only on
mm.
Tolman or Hall or Watson, only on
Yeah.
Watson, or 42. Imagine,
Well,
try to base.
but not everything of functional contextualism is based on papers, though. In terms of reference to philosophy,
Yeah,
there's that, but
it's pepper. The true criterion is pepper, the root metaphor is pepper, the
yeah,
contextualism term is pepper, the four worldview is pepper.
yeah,
Um,
yeah. Well, but the
it's
rest of
pepper.
it is the behavioral philosophy in general.
Yeah, but the main categories, acting context, truth criterion,
No, no, I see I see your point.
is
They
root
relies heavily
metaphor.
on that. Yeah, I guess I had
So
not realized how much.
imagine try
Yeah.
imagine this. Imagine someone trying in 1990 trying to create a whole psychological system based on the Skinner of 1938, the
Mm,
behavior of organism, and nothing else. Nothing else after that. Not the paper of the 45, not science and human
yeah.
behavior, not about behaviorism. He
Okay,
will
but
say
again,
that is not a good characterization of behaviorism.
no, I understand, but we can point to what's missing in that case. Like, for example, when people refer to Watson to talk about behaviorism, we say, wait, you're missing uh, the radical behaviorist perspective on the inclusion of the
Yeah,
whole repertoire. You're missing operant conditioning. You're missing RFT now. What are we missing when we look at only at paper? Would you say? Not, you don't have to go into everything because there might be a lot, but can you give some examples of things that you found interesting uh, in pragmatic philosophy specifically, or other areas that you would have expected? And I guess even we can leave aside perhaps the what we would have expected Steve or other authors in functional contextualism to mention. Even if we forget about that, what would you want to see more? What are the aspects that you'd like to see more? I can think of some. Um,
Rorty,
Say again.
maybe Richard Rorty, for instance. Just to say something, maybe Richard Rorty, maybe Wittgenstein.
And what did they say that you find interesting in a few words?
Oh, it's a lot. It's a
Yeah,
lot,
yeah, no,
but
I understand. I'm not mean to oversimplify it, but just to give us a taste, of we can maybe we'll go back to that in another episode when we can
for,
get
for
more
instance, for
depth with that.
instance,
But
you,
at
you
least
can
give us a little trailer there.
For instance, just let me show you something. For instance, process metaphysics.
Hmm, hmm.
You know, this is a book from Nicholas Rester from I don't know in the year. I mean, 1996.
Okay.
You know, this describes a kind of metaphysics that it goes like hand in glove with pragmatism
Hmm,
and with behavior analysis. Just to give you an example,
hmm.
but more than just pragmatism, the thing is this. Let's go back to our original image of the conversation in a tavern.
Yeah.
You know, what we are having here is an statement made on what one guy said
Mm,
40 years ago,
mm,
and you are disregarding everything else that happened in the conversation because we are not doing any
mm.
reference to Popper, to Bachelard, to any of the epistemologists. We are not making any contemporary philosophical references. We are only quoting one guy with
Yeah.
one theory that is not tested. The root metaphor theory is one way of organizing. Maybe it's not the best.
Hmm.
Maybe it's not the best.
Do you think that at least we should consider at least different perspectives? That in and of itself has a value. I guess it's the spirit of diversity even can have a value because in case we miss something or in case we get too rigidly attached to our way of thinking, we should, even if it was just for that purpose, we should at least look at different perspectives.
I think we need
Mm.
to broaden
Yeah, no, it's
our
interesting.
scope, our
It's interesting point.
references. I think we need to get out of. I mean,
Mm.
Pepper Pepper is not doing an analysis of pragmatism by itself. It's just presenting like a broad sketch of pragmatism, a really broad sketch
Mm,
of
mm,
pragmatism that stopped in 1942 when the
mm,
book was
mm.
published. So imagine that someone tries to speak about behavior analysis without acknowledging the differences
Yeah.
between Watson and
No,
Skinner. And you
I
would
see
say,
what you mean.
dude, come on. The name is the same, it's behaviorism,
Mm,
okay? But there are some significant differences,
yeah.
and in most
And
ways,
worse is that you can already say that there is something missing in the functional contextualism papers that were written 40 years after Pepper. But then the worst part is that 35 years later, is that 35? Yeah, almost 40 years after those first paper in functional contextualism, we've done the same because we've just quoted Steve quoting
yeah,
Pepper. And so in the end, it's very narrow, right? Yeah.
we are repeating, for
Yeah.
instance, the root, the true criterion of contextualism is successful working. We're
Yeah,
repeating
yeah, no,
that.
no, it's true. You're right.
And
We
yeah,
were.
the only because Steven says, and
Yeah, no,
okay,
to be fair, we've I count myself in the on the list of having done that without
yeah, me too, me too, me too.
without reading the original. I've only started to read more of those references that are quoted in the older papers, and it's very interesting. And I mean, that's our responsibility if we don't go there. The responsibility of
Yeah.
Steve is perhaps to have misread paper, misquoted paper. I don't know. I'd like to ask him about that. Perhaps we will do that at some point. But as a community, that's our responsibility to explore that. I appreciate that. I really enjoy it. I think when I stopped here, because we've been talking for about 2 hours, I think, and there are other things I'd like to talk about with you. Maybe getting a little more into the this concept of ontology, and perhaps we can go back to the three assumptions that we talked about pragmatism. I'd like to talk more about ontology and monism with you. So perhaps we can do that in a different episode. But I think that's a good place to wrap up. I greatly appreciated your perspective on the peppers and the root metaphors and all, and that's it's really fascinating, very interesting. And again, part of that reflexive process of looking at our own way of thinking, of it's a whole process, right? To realize, like, you could see me like questioning and say, well, are we really missing something? Why is that important? And I still think that's something to explore. But you showed me that in and of itself, if we're not taking into account the diversity and the different elements that there is in the in that field, that's already a problem. Especially if we start to repeat what's been said before and without questioning it, then that's and ironically, that's what we are supposed to work against with ACT, right? To try to get more back in with experience and not just follow rules through clients. So we should always be careful with uh, not doing the very thing that we're trying to undermine. So, it's very cool. Do you have any last thoughts, words, or questions? What do you think?
In general, I think I would endorse what you just said. Um, my concern with this, I've been studying this for several years now, and um, to me, the main goal is the conversation.
Mm,
I think that the process has to be that conversation.
hmm
And the way things are right now in contextual science with functional contextualism, we are referring referring to two papers, one
mm,
from 1988, one from 1993. It's a chapter, actually, the second one. And
hmm
the core of functional contextualism is just those two papers
hmm
and a couple of little addendas, something like that, but
mm.
nothing significant.
Interesting.
And we are talking about that, and it's quite narrow.
Yeah, it's
It's
a bit
quite narrow.
fragile. If you think of it as a philosophical foundations, it might be a little weak. Yeah.
The Pepper's analysis is kind of a simplistic analysis.
Uh-huh, uh-huh,
It's appealing because it's easier to
uh-huh.
understand. That's the main appeal of Pepper's. And I'm not saying this against Pepper. I like Pepper, actually. I have
No.
like five five books, or four or
Okay.
five books from Pepper here. I read the guy quite a lot, but it is a simplistic analysis that
Mm-hmm.
takes like 25 centuries of philosophy and cluster into four groups.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a simplistic analysis. And Stephen's interpretation of that is also a simplistic
I
analysis
see. I
based
see.
on
I
that
see.
because it's just two papers.
Mm-hmm.
For a philosophy of science, if you want like a robust philosophy of science, you need something with more precision,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
with more scope, with more um, development. And we need, in order to do that, we need to talk with the people. We need to talk with the philosophers.
Okay.
We need to talk with the people, the professionals in this. We need to talk with
Yeah.
them. What are we
Yeah.
doing wrong? What are we doing right? What
Mm,
ideas do you have? What can we learn from the philosophy, the history of philosophy on the second half of the 20th century? What can we learn from
mm,
the past 50 years? There is something new, maybe. And in order to do that, we have to leave home. We
mm,
have to leave the house.
yeah.
We are like enclosed in the
Mm,
functional contextualism that is a neologist. A neologism is a new term, contextualism, functional contextualism. If we reintegrate our philosophical perspective to pragmatism, to the discussion, it's easier to start talking with the people who knows about this kind of stuff.
yeah. Yeah.
I think functional contextualism, I think pragmatism as a philosophy of science for behavior analysis is the best choice.
Hmm.
I also think that. I think the analysis of functional contextualism is broadly right, broadly adequate.
Hmm.
But in there hasn't been any improvement on the philosophical base for the past 40 years,
Yeah.
30 years.
Yeah.
So I think maybe if we open up that, if we like take things out of the basement and say, okay, these are
Yeah.
our assumptions, maybe,
Mm-hmm.
and we start talking about this and stop with this thing of like, I'm doing my thing and I
Yeah.
don't care what anyone
That's
else is
that's what
doing.
I was saying
These are
earlier.
my goals.
Yeah.
This
Exactly.
is my worldview, and my worldview cannot be compared with
Yeah. Yeah.
anything
Yeah.
else.
Yeah.
So no criticism is valid in
That's
terms
that's
of
that's what I was saying earlier when I said like I read, and I cannot quote someone in particular here, but I feel like it's something I've read across different papers. This idea that you cannot really argue because they cannot be proven to be right or wrong. They are statements, and you can be judged based on how consistent you are with it. But like values, you cannot really argue against a philosophical assumption. And that doesn't make sense to me. To me, they are like everything. You reflect, you explore, you question, and you see what continues to be true. It's a it's a different process than experimental science. It's conceptual, but it's when it's good philosophy, in my opinion, it's well anchored in science and or any kind of experience. Um, and you can test your philosophical assumptions against experience and logic too. Are you it should always move toward more coherence and at the
yeah,
same time be tested. So perhaps what you're saying is a reflection of that very uh, conceptualization of philosophy as being something that's you choose and then you can start working and you should not have to go back to it and be questioned about it. You can have your own philosophy if you want, but
yeah.
you cannot really question mine because that's not just, I agree that's something that's to me um, problematic. At some points, it carries this risk of being in a closed system, and closed system die. Closed system
Yeah.
don't. Yeah, it's the
I
old
want to say,
echo chamber effect that can happen, and that you describe with quoting always the same paper and not even going to read the original paper. And we have to be aware of that. I think we have to look at that with honesty.
I want to say
Yep.
one final thing to close my participation with this. But Pepper wrote his book trying to avoid dogmatism.
Yeah.
And Stephen says the same thing.
He warned
But
against dogmatism, and he
they,
said there's a potential
yeah,
risk of contextualism. That's something
yeah.
he
But
says.
Pepper said that dogmatism is belief in excess of evidence. That was Pepper's statement of dogmatism. When you believe more of what the evidence provides you.
Yeah.
Stephen says it differently. He says to claim more
Oh, yeah. Hmm.
than the evidence.
Yeah.
My my take on dogmatism is that dogmatism is the the closure of discussion, the
Mm.
closure of dialogue.
Yeah.
Dogmatism is when you are not willing to speak, when you are
Yeah.
not willing to dialogue, to
Mhm.
talk with me, to present arguments. And one way of getting to that kind of dogmatism is like saying this is the truth.
Yeah, yeah, and you
And
cannot justify or unjustify. That's not subject to. Yeah, I agree.
exactly.
I
And
agree.
the other one,
Yeah,
and I think this is a risk, is to say this is my truth.
yeah.
Because in each case, you ended up on the same spot.
Mm,
I'm not talking with you, I'm not dialoguing with you because
I
this is
agree.
my truth or because this is only the only truth possible. So I think we need to avoid that kind of dogmatism. We need to keep the conversation open. We need to keep the dialogue open. And the best way to do that is like open up our assumptions, open up
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
our philosophy to talk with the people and don't have a closed system as you
yeah.
said.
Well, that's a
Mhm.
wonderful conclusion. I really love this conclusion, and it feels so fits so well with the spirit of this podcast, which I developed with that very idea to have conversations and to not leaving anything out doesn't mean we can literally talk about everything and we're make sure to cover everything, but that it's always open and nothing is left out a priori or the discussion never ends. So I love that. Thank you, Fabian. Always incredibly enjoyable to chat
Yeah,
with you about this stuff, and I learned a lot today. Really appreciate it. Perhaps another episode where we talk about ontology, monism, things like that. If you're up for it, I don't know when.
do you
And
think anyone is going to see this video till the end
well, they will tell us. They will tell us. But I have the sense that at least some people will. And it's even if it's just a few, I think it will be cool. No, you might be surprised. I think people will enjoy the spirit of this conversation, and perhaps at some point we invite Steve to because I think you make great points, but I think I'd like to have his perspective on all that. So perhaps we'll
yeah,
do another episode where we talk about ontology, monism, since we covered pragmatism quite a bit, but we'll have to go back to it. And then maybe we invite Steve to and ask him some questions and hear his
conversation.
perspective. Conversation, exactly. We open a conversation if he's up for it, of course. Thank you, Fabian.
It was a pleasure.